In a 2019 interview with GQ, DMX claimed that his first arrest, correction, his first two arrests, occurred at 10 years of age, for arson and then for assault. It was the beginning of a long string of crime, a beginning that is often tied to beatings from his mom and abandonment by his dad, a beginning that earned him the teenage era nickname, Crazy Earl. Even as DMX became a global rap superstar, the Crazy Earl persona followed him. X may have pulled the plug on his Damien series, in which he is constantly tempted to walk on the dark path. But his albums were still dominated by his internal conflict between good and evil, thereby producing the most fascinating spiritual warfare ever committed to wax. But even that fascination began to dim as DMX's career started to falter and his rap sheet continued to expand. Despite attempting a fresh start by moving to Cave Creek, a suburb of Phoenix, Arizona, his legal troubles continued. It all started on August 24, 2007, when police, acting on reports of animal neglect, raided DMX's home to find a scene gruesome enough to believe that perhaps the well-known pit bull enthusiast was not as loving and caring as was believed. The incident put him in the crosshairs of Maricopa County Sheriff Joe Arpaio, who was reported to have tried several times to resolve the issue before the raid occurred. A second raid on May 9, 2008, resulted in an arrest and combined charges stemming from both raids. Apparently scared by the likelihood of ending up in jail again, X disappeared. Arpaio, incensed, escalated the search for the rapper to the level of a fugitive being profiled on America's Most Wanted. It turned out that DMX was hiding out in the Palm Island, Florida mansion of star producer Scott Storch, the same guy who produced Lord Give Me a Sign off DMX's previous album, Year of the Dog, again. Storch was reportedly trying to get X enrolled in rehab, but law enforcement wasn't trying to hear that. Returned to Arizona, X was eventually sentenced to 90 days in jail on January 31, 2009. More incidents of bad behavior lengthened his stay in jail into 2010. By the time DMX got out on July 6, 2010, his wife, Tashira, had seemingly had enough. The multiple arrests, the jail stints, the drug addiction, and the infidelity. She announced their separation 2 weeks after DMX's release, only for her and her estranged husband to end up on VH1's Couples Therapy as a last-ditch effort to save their marriage and make some cash. Because by now, DMX hadn't released an album in almost 6 years, not to mention that his once promising film career had devolved into straight-to-DVD releases. It wasn't like he wasn't trying. In line with his preacher aspirations, X was planning a double album for release in 2008. The first half, named Walk With Me Now, was supposed to be hip-hop, and the second half, You'll Fly With Me Later, was supposed to be gospel music. Pat Divine Bars Gallo, who had a production credit on Year of the Dog again, was behind the boards, and Janice, an aspiring singer who X had met at a Phoenix Nordstrom's and sang vocals on the previous album, was a main contributor. It was supposed to be a profanity-free, spiritually uplifting conduit for DMX. But Crazy Earl, with his legal, domestic, and morality problems, got in the way.
And of course, I want to talk about his driver's license a little bit. Because I don't think you have one.
No, don't have one.
We'll talk about
You don't need one. All you need is keys in the car.
You need a driver's license.
No, you don't.
Plus, X needed a label, and he didn't have one. Until 7 Arts Entertainment showed up, primarily a British independent film production company. 7 Arts nevertheless had a music division to accommodate X. But this was no Def Jam Universal or Sony Columbia, and the upcoming 7th album, which was first announced on October 2011, had its release date pushed several times, aggravating the increasingly irritated DMX. An EP through his Bloodline imprint, The Way In, was quickly released to whet the public's appetite, as well as serve as a placeholder for Undisputed, which eventually arrived on September 11, 2012. DMX was clearly past his prime, both critically and commercially, so the general question, at least for the few people who cared, was probably not how much he had left, but rather how bad the album was going to be.
Crazy, 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 crazy.
Any audiophile who had followed DMX from his Def Jam days would have been dismayed a few seconds after pressing play on Undisputed. The once formidable canine in human form could tremble mountains and shatter icebergs with his explosive delivery and verbal imagery. But the consequences of years of hard living had begun to show up in Year of the Dog again, and the decline is even more pronounced here. Singing, nay, howling through the intro, looking without seeing, reveals a voice decimated by addiction. DMX now sounded unbearably harsh, like a terminally ill guard dog trying to bark to show that he could still scare off any intruder. And then there's the sonic quality. Track after track reveals why it was probably best to get a major record label deal. Under the aegis of UMG, DMX's albums were expertly mixed and mastered. That especially holds true for his third album, And Then There Was X, which has this sheen worthy of a Michael Bay directed movie. Hopping from one of hip-hop's storied record companies to a streets division of a record label under another conglomerate showed in the comparatively inferior mix and mastering of Year of the Dog again. And the downgrade is even steeper under the overlordship of a place that is not even a real record label. It would be a grand surprise if it's revealed that the tracks weren't mixed and mastered at all. Everything sounds murky and stifled, like the producers and sound engineers were either pressed for time to finish up or swapping the same outdated recording equipment between Yonkers and Phoenix. The absence of proper mixing blunts the overall power of Undisputed, which is a shame because there are some good tracks buried in here. Cold World, for instance, features Andrina Mill singing soulfully over a Dame Grease co-produced beat constructed from the melody of The Temptations' Mother Nature and a breakbeat taken from Barry White's I'm Gonna Love You Just a Little More Baby. Dame Grease shows up again, this time as soul producer with the smooth R&B flavored Have You Ever, Thanks Freddie Jackson, and DMX going through a wide range of situations and emotions. Grease is not the only longtime production collaborator here. Swiss Beats has the New Orleans-style stomp of What They Don't Know, as well as Y'all Don't Really Know, which feels like it could have been on the Conan the Barbarian soundtrack. The 70s-style horns and crooning, courtesy of Eddie Kendricks's Loving You the Second Time Around in I'm Back, is also worth mentioning. And Frankenstein encourages DMX to embrace his inner monster, uncharacteristically fast-rapping, comparatively speaking, over a galloping beat that he can't help but tell the producer how impressed he is with it. But not even the valiance of producers and backing vocalists can quite mask DMX's deteriorated skills. There are a few spots here and there where his battle bars are tolerable and coherent, and where his delivery, flow, and enunciation don't feel like a muffled, sputtering engine. And when both beats and rhymes don't deliver, it's an unmitigated disaster. The first single, I Don't Dance, featuring a serviceable but unspectacular verse from MGK, is like listening to synthesizers deep fried to oblivion, with X sounding like he's not going to rehab anytime soon. Sucker for Love, with Danny Stevenson contributing vocals, feels undercooked with barely anything apart from forceful kicks married to acoustic guitar strumming, and a crassness that makes earlier offerings like Shorty Was the Bomb sound like a hymn. I just wanted my cute as a and she got a big butt. I Get Scared, which features a singer that sounds like Hayley Williams of Paramore, could have worked out due to its allusion to X fighting his addiction. But this song was not going to be DMX's Airplanes. The pop rock beat overwhelms X, a perfect symbolism of the once domineering rapper drowning in his vices. Even Dame Grease fumbles as a co-producer with No Love. This time, Andrina Mill's admirable efforts can't salvage the muffled Barry White sampling beat. Come on, Grease. And then there's Get Your Money Up, a tuneless mess that fails miserably in providing a marching band-style experience. Notably, but inexplicably, it's the only track that's left out of the edited version of Undisputed. Thank God. Speaking of God, the usual spiritual section at the end of the album has been shifted to the middle. Maybe DMX wanted to shake things up a little with the album formatting. Fair enough, but it's hard to reconcile DMX's real-life struggles with any musical hope. Slippin' Again is the sequel to the memorable 1998 single, Slippin', but forget an optimistic ending. It's just more cries, screams, and wails for help amid the booming snares and burning synths. It's a depressing abyss. Undisputed marks the first time X skips chronologically numbering the prayer tracks. Shouldn't this be the prayer or prayer 7? Oh well, it matters little, since by this time this series had devolved into indistinguishable ramblings of self-denial about the seriousness of his situation. At this point, God was probably like, remember the time when I said this?
Listen to me, I'm here, and I can only help you if you want me to help. What do you want for yourself?
Aight then. Head Up, which was the second and final single, fares a bit better. Tronzilla is behind the boards here for a beat that sounds like it was mixed away from the environment of Undisputed. The instrumentation and the choir are clearer than anything else heard on this album, with DMX using the inspiring gospel-fused backdrop to, for the umpteenth time, admit his weaknesses and call for heavenly assistance. Granted, this is no Lord Give Me a Sign, but considering the overall quality of the album, Head Up is one of the very few strong cuts. As Undisputed ends at the triumphant already, with divine bars providing the 80s era arena rock feel for DMX to rhyme using the title attached to each bar, there's an undeniable aura of abandonment and absence. The clear-cut hits and catchy hooks? Gone. The menacing bark and devastating bite? Gone. The Locks, Eve, and other frequent Rough Rider guests? Gone. The Dean brothers as executive producers? Gone. DMX and Grease take their place. The big-name guest artists? Gone. Even the Bloodline artists are gone. Well, save for Kashmir, who rhymes with X on a soundbed constructed with pianos over the Ashley's Roach clip breakbeat in, get this, I Got Your Back. Unsurprisingly, the Undisputed album debuted at number 19 on the Billboard 200 chart, and then dropped off entirely 3 weeks later. None of the singles charted anywhere, and the strenuous relationship between DMX and Seven Arts was about to get worse. According to Seven Arts, X had signed a 2-album deal. X was adamant that the deal was for 1 album. Unhappy with the experience and results of Undisputed, DMX spurned them in favor of working exclusively with his Rough Rider homies and longtime friends, Swiss Beats and Dame Grease. So, in January 2015, Seven Arts, stinging from the losses incurred from Undisputed and DMX's defection, retaliated by putting out the material they had as the second album using the title originally meant for the first one, the now seemingly derisively named Redemption of the Beast. Understandably, DMX and his management were upset. Even more upset was the federal government. 3 months later, Seven Arts founder Peter Hoffman was among 3 people convicted of committing tax credit fraud in the state of Louisiana. By the time a New Orleans judge delivered the sentence a year later, the company was done. But that was what DMX's career had devolved to. A terrible official 7th studio album, an unofficial 8th studio album, and an official 8th studio album that eventually took years to complete. Undisputed would be the last authorized collection of DMX material released during his lifetime, and while people had generally accepted that his best years were far behind him, even his eroded core of ardent fans must have been shocked by the bottom-of-the-barrel quality of the album. Ultimately, Crazy Earl knocked out DMX, and he barely had anyone else to blame but himself.